August 17th, 2005. We're on Southport Island on Cape New Wagon Road, not too far from the bridge. As you climb the hill, you come into sight of Sawyer's Pond, and there's a little road that peels off to the right if you're coming from the bridge, and that's where we are. And there's the corner of Sawyer's Pond Road and Pinecliff Road. I've come down here with my camera to poke around a little bit in the history of Southport. This particular spot was a location of an ice works, and it has been the water source for the town of Southport. No longer functions like that. Sawyer's Pond. We're standing at the far end of the dam. We're looking back down that road that I just walked up and down into a little ravine. I read somewhere that there's a grave in there, so I thought I'd come out here and see if I couldn't find it and see who in the history of Southport was buried there. There's a little bridge down here. I'm gonna stop at the bridge and peer down into that ravine. Kind of dark and deep down there. Not a likely spot for a grave, I wouldn't think. So I moved down off the bridge and down, and there it is. This is in a little flat area, so there may very well be that there are other graves in here and the gravestones have fallen down. But let's find out who this person was that was buried here. Buried on this site was a young man by the name of William Decker. Died April 13th, 1821, it looks like. He was a young man of 24 when he died, and he's been in here for quite a while, like 180 years. A lot of people come up here have no idea at all that William Decker's buried in that little triangular piece there. And I suspect that if William Decker had anything to say about it, he'd be just as well off with that. He'd be pleased that he's being left alone. 5 or 6 months have passed now since I made that visit, and I've used the time in between to try to find something out about William Decker and about that area. The Hendricks Hill Museum, home of the Southport Historical Society, is a good place to go to do research. The reference room in the museum is well equipped with reference materials, a computer, town records, videos, books. One of the books is Green's History of Booth Bay. Looking in Green's, we immediately discover the Decker family. There were 2 individuals named David and Eunice Decker who were very early settlers, and they had several sons, one of which was Thomas, and Thomas in turn had a son, his youngest. His name was William. He was born on May 11th, 1796, and that's our man. Green's also has a section that's called Marriage Intentions, and we look down marriage intentions, and we see that in 1816 William Decker married Anna Bragg. William died 5 years later, then Anna remarried in 1823. It's a little bit of a mystery why William would have been the only Decker to be buried in that one spot, being as there were several other family members living at the same time, and they were either buried somewhere else or maybe their gravestones are under the ground there. Our man William had a brother whose name was Ebenezer, and he died in 1822, only 1 year later than William himself. So it shows that there were other people who certainly could have been buried in that same general area that William is in, but for some reason that's the only stone that's there. The large monument in Decker Cemetery, which is the Decker monument, is really Ebenezer Decker, a later descendant, and all of his family members. Decker is a familiar name for people who live in Southport. There's Decker's Cove, there's the Decker Cemetery. And in the files in the museum, there's a picture of Ebenezer Decker, who used to sell gas right near the end of the bridge at Decker's Cove. The Old House book mentions numerous Deckers associated with old houses on the island. Also mentions how the road 238 was made in 1923. The Old Town Way used to come across the bridge and would go all the way around the end of Decker Cove, up over the hill and back of Ralph Spinney's house, and then came here, as you can see in this picture. It came on the west side of the Sawyer's Pond. This picture is actually a postcard, but oftentimes postcards were made from photographs and then colored in. You can see that the road that passes around there is sort of at the same level as the water, and that road is underwater, where the current boundaries of the much larger pond now just covered that road right up. The new road was built about 7 years after the bridge went across Decker Cove, and the school was moved down off the hill, and the road was redirected so that it didn't pass in the same way it went on the other side of the pond. At the time the road was redirected, actually the pond was much larger. It had been made larger by putting in a higher dam. The town acquired all the land all around the larger body of water by eminent domain, and it became the seasonal water source for the town of Southport. This U.S. Geological Survey map from 1891 clearly shows how the road passed to the west of the little blue speck, which was the pond at the time. It also shows the big gorge that's directly to the west of the pond. When the dam was elevated to its current height, the water just backfilled and filled in that whole gully, and that basically is the outline of the current larger body of water, still known as Sawyer's Pond. A later U.S. Geological Survey map dated 1941 shows how the new road goes on the east side of a much larger body of water, and the water is filled in that gully. Another interesting point here is that the crossroad was redirected about the same time. The crossroad used to come up over the hill and go right to the head of the lobster pound by Pig Cove. Now the crossroad makes a T with Route 238, and you can actually in the wintertime look down there and see the Sawyer's Pond. You couldn't do that with the old way that the road went. Another good source of factual information from the Historical Society are the cards that were put together by Sterling Nelson from the courthouse records in Wiscasset. The cards record every land transfer that took place from the earliest records in Southport all the way up to 1989. William Sawyer acquired the land all around the pond in 1890, and that he actually had an ice works there from the earliest days. So that smallish pond was actually an ice pond, and that's shown in that photograph with the horse and buggy also. Even earlier than that, the ice pond used to be known as Baker's Ice Pond. That's because E.L. Decker sold that area, including the pond, to Baker in 1884. Ice was cut on the pond, stored in ice houses at the end down by the dams, transported on a wooden trestle under the Pine Cliff Bridge down to ice houses right on deep water, or is loaded into schooners, and off it went for sale. This is a recent picture of the ravine next to which William Decker was buried. He's right up there on the right hand side of this picture. So William Decker's grave, his burial 180 years ago, was a reminder of a much simpler time, and a lot of things have happened right at that very site. A lot of progress, I guess we would call it. To this spot to find a little piece share something with William Decker as he stands here in the quiet with cars whizzing by. It is nice to know that you, with a little bit of effort, can find some information more than you knew before. Also important to recognize that in your efforts you're only scraping the very thinnest of veneers of what actually took place in the lifetime of the people that have lived here.